For most people living between the 11th and 14th centuries, life in the medieval world was neither heroic nor dramatic. It unfolded quietly, governed by habit, necessity, and routines that changed very little across generations. The modern imagination often fills the Middle Ages with knights, castles, and constant violence. Yet the overwhelming majority of medieval people would never see a battle, never meet a noble, and never travel more than a few miles from where they were born. This documentary explores how ordinary life actually functioned in medieval Europe. Not how it is remembered in stories, but how it was lived day after day by farmers, craftsmen, women, children, and laborers. It is a study of rhythm rather than spectacle, of systems rather than individuals. To understand medieval life, one must first set aside modern assumptions about time, comfort, and progress. Medieval people did not experience life as a march toward improvement. They lived within a world they believed had always existed in roughly the same form and would likely continue unchanged long after their own deaths. Most medieval lives were defined by the land. Agriculture was not merely an occupation. It was the foundation of survival. In many regions, more than 90% of the population worked directly with the soil. The success or failure of a harvest could determine whether an entire community lived through the winter or faced hunger. Villages were typically small and tightly knit. A medieval village might consist of a few dozen families clustered around fields, pastures, and a church. Houses were practical structures, often built from timber, clay, and straw. Stone homes were rare and usually reserved for the wealthy or for religious buildings. Inside these homes, space was limited. Many families lived and slept in a single room. Privacy, as modern people understand it, did not exist. Daily life unfolded in shared spaces, where cooking, working, eating, and resting all occurred within sight of one another. Heating was minimal. Fireplaces or hearths provided warmth, but fuel was expensive and had to be gathered or purchased. During winter months, cold was a constant presence, accepted rather than resisted. Thick clothing, layered garments, and shared body heat were essential tools of survival. The day began at sunrise, not by choice but by necessity. Artificial lighting was weak and costly. Candles were made from tallow or beeswax and were used sparingly. Darkness shaped the medieval schedule. Work, meals, and rest followed the natural rhythm of daylight rather than the clock. Time itself was experienced differently. Mechanical clocks were rare before the late Middle Ages and were found mainly in monasteries or large towns. For most people, time was measured by church bells, daylight, and seasonal changes. Precision was unnecessary. Repetition was what mattered. Food dominated much of daily thought. Medieval diets were simple and repetitive. Bread was the staple of life, consumed at nearly every meal. Grain shortages or poor milling could have serious consequences, as bread quality directly affected health and survival. Meat was not absent, but it was limited. Most families could not afford to eat meat regularly. When they did, it often came from pigs, chickens, or preserved sources such as salted fish. Hunting was restricted by law in many regions, reserved for the nobility. Vegetables, legumes, and dairy products filled the gaps. Cheese, onions, beans, and cabbage were common. Spices existed but were expensive and used sparingly by ordinary people. Contrary to popular belief, medieval food was not universally rotten or heavily spiced to hide spoilage. Freshness mattered, but preservation methods were carefully practiced. Water sources varied in quality. Wells, streams, and rainwater were commonly used. While water contamination did occur, Medieval people were not universally ignorant of hygiene. Many communities understood which sources were safer than others, even if they lacked scientific explanations. Cleanliness was not absent from medieval life, though it looked different from modern standards. Bathing occurred, sometimes communally, especially in towns. Soap existed, though it was coarse. Cleanliness was valued for comfort and health, even if it was not practiced daily. Clothing was durable and functional. Most garments were handmade and repaired repeatedly. Fashion changed slowly for the lower classes. A single outfit might last for years. Colors and fabrics signaled social status, regulated in some places by laws that restricted certain materials to the wealthy. Work was physically demanding and began early in life. Children were not considered a separate phase of life in the modern sense. By the age of 7 or 8, many children were already contributing to household labor. Childhood was short not because it was ignored, but because survival required participation. Education was limited. Literacy was uncommon outside religious institutions and urban centers. Knowledge was transmitted orally, through observation and repetition. Skills were learned by watching elders, not through formal instruction. Religion structured time, belief, and social order. The church calendar shaped the year, marking seasons of work, fasting, and celebration. Even for those who questioned aspects of religious authority, faith provided a framework for understanding suffering, fortune, and death. Death itself was a familiar presence. Infant mortality was high. Illnesses that are easily treated today were often fatal. Yet medieval people were not uniquely obsessed with death. They simply lived closer to it. Funerals, remembrance, and prayer were woven naturally into community life. Despite hardship, medieval life was not defined solely by suffering. There were festivals, communal meals, shared labor, and moments of rest. Laughter, storytelling, and music existed alongside labor and loss. Life was difficult, but it was also meaningful within its own context. Understanding medieval life requires resisting the urge to judge it by modern standards. These were not people waiting for progress to arrive. They lived within a stable, coherent world shaped by environment, tradition, and necessity. In the next section, we will move deeper into the structure of medieval society itself, how villages governed themselves, how authority was experienced by ordinary people, and how order was maintained without modern institutions. To understand how medieval life functioned on a daily basis, one must look beyond individual households and examine the structures that held communities together. Medieval society was not chaotic or ungoverned, despite the absence of modern states or bureaucracies. Order existed, but it was local, personal, and deeply rooted in tradition. Most people experienced authority not as an abstract system, but as a set of familiar relationships. Power was visible and immediate. A village might be under the control of a local lord, a monastery, or a distant noble, but the actual enforcement of rules often came from neighbors, elders, and customs that everyone understood. The village itself functioned as a unit of cooperation. Fields were commonly organized under open field systems, where strips of land were farmed by individual families but managed collectively. Decisions about planting, harvesting, and grazing were often made together. Survival depended on coordination rather than competition. Disputes were common, but they were usually resolved locally. Village courts handled minor conflicts, boundary disagreements, and accusations of misconduct. These courts relied more on testimony and reputation than on written law. A person's standing in the community mattered greatly. Trust, once lost, was difficult to regain. The concept of law in the medieval world was layered. Royal law existed, church law existed, and customary law governed everyday behavior. For most people, customary law was the most important. It dictated how land was inherited, how marriages were recognized, and how conflicts were settled. Punishment, when it occurred, was often public and symbolic rather than purely punitive. Fines, public apologies, or temporary exclusion from communal activities were common. The goal was not imprisonment, which was rare and expensive, but restoration of order and social balance. Feudalism, often misunderstood, was less a rigid system than a network of obligations. While modern descriptions emphasize hierarchy, everyday experience focused more on duties than titles. A peasant owed labor or rent. A lord owed protection and access to land. These relationships were unequal, but they were also mutual in expectation. For many medieval people, the greatest authority was not a noble or a king, but the church. The local parish priest was a constant presence, overseeing baptisms, marriages, and burials. Religious instruction was simple, repetitive, and designed for oral transmission. The church offered moral guidance, explanation for suffering, and a sense of cosmic order. Festivals and holy days punctuated the year. These were moments when work paused and communities gathered. Feast days were not merely religious obligations. They were social anchors. Food was shared, music was played, and labor routines were temporarily suspended. Markets were another key feature of medieval life, particularly in towns. Weekly markets allowed villagers to exchange surplus goods, acquire tools, and hear news from outside their immediate area. For many, the market was the primary connection to the wider world. Towns themselves were growing during this period. While still small by modern standards, medieval towns introduced new rhythms of life. Craftsmen organized into guilds which regulated training, quality, and prices. Guild membership provided security and identity, but it also imposed strict rules. Urban life differed significantly from rural life. Space was tighter, sanitation was more complex, and social interactions were more diverse. Yet towns offered opportunities unavailable in villages. A person could, in some cases, escape the rigid expectations of rural hierarchy by relocating to a town. Women's lives in the medieval world were varied and shaped by class, location, and marital status. While legal and social restrictions existed, women were active participants in economic life. They worked in fields, managed households, sold goods at markets, and in towns operated businesses. Marriage was both a personal and economic arrangement. Romantic ideals existed, but survival and alliance were primary concerns. Most marriages occurred within the same community. Divorce was rare and difficult, but informal separations did happen. Children, though vulnerable, were valued. High infant mortality did not imply emotional detachment. Medieval parents grieved deeply, even if their culture emphasized acceptance of loss. Surviving children were integrated early into work and social life, learning responsibilities through participation. Illness and injury were constant threats. Medical knowledge was limited, but not absent. Herbal remedies, bloodletting, and prayer were commonly used. Healing combined observation, tradition, and faith. While outcomes were unpredictable, care was often communal. Aging was respected but also feared. Elderly people who could no longer work relied on family or community support. There was no formal retirement. One worked as long as one was able. Despite the hardships, medieval people were not passive victims of their circumstances. They adapted, negotiated, and found meaning within their world. Humor, superstition, storytelling, and belief helped people navigate uncertainty. In the next section, we will explore how medieval people understood danger, disaster, and change, including famine, disease, and the slow transformations that reshaped their world without them fully realizing it. For medieval people, danger was not an abstract concept discussed in distant terms. It was a regular feature of life, woven quietly into everyday expectations. Famine, disease, fire, and weather were not rare disasters but recurring forces that shaped how people understood the world and their place within it. Famine was the most persistent threat. A single failed harvest could push entire regions into hunger. Consecutive failures were catastrophic. Medieval agriculture relied heavily on predictable seasons, and even small climatic shifts could have severe consequences. There were no large-scale food reserves capable of stabilizing shortages. When grain ran out, there were few alternatives. Hunger did not always arrive suddenly. It often crept in slowly, marked first by rising prices, then by thinner meals, and finally by desperation. People diluted bread with inferior grains or mixed it with roots and husks. Livestock were slaughtered early. Seed grain was consumed, sacrificing future harvests for immediate survival. Communities responded as best they could. Churches distributed alms. Lords sometimes reduced rents. Families supported one another when possible. But these systems had limits. When famine became widespread, social bonds strained under pressure. Disease was an even more unpredictable force. Medieval people lacked germ theory, but they were not ignorant of patterns. They recognized that certain illnesses spread quickly, that crowded conditions worsened sickness, and that isolation could sometimes help. Still, responses were shaped more by tradition and belief than by medical certainty. The most devastating outbreak, the Black Death of the 14th century, permanently altered medieval society. Yet it did not arrive in a vacuum. Earlier epidemics had already conditioned people to expect sudden loss. Death, while feared, was not shocking in the way it is in modern societies. Illness affected all classes, but its impact was uneven. The poor lived in closer quarters and had fewer resources for care. The wealthy could sometimes flee cities or isolate themselves, though this was not always effective. Disease ignored social boundaries more than most threats. Fire was another constant danger. Buildings constructed from wood, thatch, and straw burned easily. Towns were especially vulnerable. A single spark could destroy entire neighborhoods. Firefighting equipment was minimal. Prevention relied on rules, vigilance, and luck. Natural disasters were interpreted through religious frameworks. Floods, droughts, and storms were often seen as signs of divine displeasure or tests of faith. These interpretations were not merely symbolic. They shaped behavior. Communities responded with prayer, fasting, and ritual alongside practical measures. Fear, however, did not dominate medieval life. People adapted psychologically to uncertainty. Risk was normalized. The future was not assumed to be better than the past. It was expected to resemble it. This mindset encouraged resilience rather than anxiety. Change, when it occurred, was slow and often unnoticed in the moment. Medieval people did not perceive themselves as living through an era of transformation. Yet beneath the surface, gradual shifts were reshaping their world. Agricultural techniques improved incrementally. Crop rotation systems spread. Tools became more efficient. These changes increased productivity, but they unfolded across generations. No single farmer experienced them as a revolution. Trade expanded steadily. Roads improved. Rivers were used more effectively for transport. Goods traveled farther, and with them, ideas. Most villagers encountered these changes indirectly, through markets and stories rather than direct experience. Population growth placed pressure on land and resources. As villages expanded, marginal lands were cultivated. Forests were cleared. Marshes were drained. These efforts increased food production but also made communities more vulnerable to environmental stress. Social mobility remained limited, but it existed. A skilled craftsman might improve his standing. A successful merchant could acquire wealth. Education, particularly within the church, offered rare paths to influence. These opportunities were exceptions, but they mattered. War, while less constant than popular imagination suggests, still affected medieval life. Armies moved through regions, requisitioning food and labor. Fortifications offered some protection, but civilians bore much of the burden. Even when not directly involved, communities prepared for the possibility. Despite these pressures, medieval society did not collapse under its own weight. It adjusted. Institutions evolved slowly. Customs shifted subtly. People responded to challenges using the tools available to them, both practical and cultural. Belief systems played a stabilizing role. Faith offered explanations for suffering that made endurance possible. Rituals provided structure in times of chaos. Stories and shared narratives helped communities make sense of loss. The medieval world was not static, but its changes were measured in decades rather than years. People lived their entire lives without witnessing dramatic transformation. What mattered most was continuity, the preservation of land, family, and tradition. In the next section, we will examine how medieval people understood identity and belonging, how they defined who they were, where they fit, and what gave their lives meaning beyond survival. Identity in the medieval world was not primarily individual in the modern sense. People understood themselves through relationships, obligations, and place. To know who someone was meant knowing where they belonged, whom they were connected to, and what role they fulfilled within their community. The most important marker of identity was locality. A person was defined by their village, town, or region. Travel was limited, and few people ever left the area where they were born. Accents, customs, and even farming practices varied from place to place, reinforcing a strong sense of local belonging. Family formed the core of social life. Extended families often lived close together, sharing labor, resources, and responsibility. Family reputation mattered deeply, and individuals' behavior reflected not only on themselves, but on their kin. Honor and trust were collective assets. Names themselves reflected this worldview. Many people were identified by occupation, location, or family connection rather than by fixed surnames. A person might be known as John the Miller or Alice from the Hill. Identity was descriptive, rooted in function and place. Social class was clearly defined, but it was not always experienced as constant oppression. Medieval society accepted hierarchy as a natural order. Inequality was expected, even justified through religious belief. This acceptance did not eliminate resentment or conflict, but it shaped how people interpreted their circumstances. Belonging was reinforced through participation. Work, worship, and celebration were communal acts. Absence was noticeable. Isolation was dangerous, not only economically but socially. To be cut off from one's community was to lose protection, support, and identity. Religion played a central role in defining meaning. Faith was not confined to private belief. It structured the entire worldview. God's presence was assumed in daily life, in success and failure alike. This belief provided coherence in a world of uncertainty. Rituals marked life's transitions. Baptism, marriage, and burial were not merely personal events but communal ones. They reinforced shared values and collective memory. Even those who questioned religious authority rarely rejected the rituals themselves. Work, too, carried meaning beyond survival. Labor was seen as a moral duty. Idleness was condemned not simply for economic reasons, but as a spiritual failing. Work connected individuals to divine order and social responsibility. Leisure existed, but it was integrated into communal rhythms. Games, music, and storytelling provided relief from labor. These activities strengthened bonds and transmitted culture. Oral tradition preserved history, humor, and shared values. Storytelling was especially important. Tales of saints, heroes, and local figures circulated widely. These stories reinforced moral lessons and offered models of behavior. They were not consumed passively. They were discussed, adapted, and retold. Superstition and belief coexisted with practical knowledge. Charms, omens, and folklore shaped how people interpreted events. These beliefs offered a sense of control in a world where outcomes were often unpredictable. Gender roles shaped identity, but they were not monolithic. Expectations existed, yet lived experience varied widely. A woman managing a household, a widow running a business, or a man unable to farm due to injury all navigated roles flexibly when necessity demanded it. Aging brought changes in status. Elders were often respected for experience and memory. They served as keepers of tradition. Yet aging also brought vulnerability. Support depended on family and community rather than formal institutions. Outsiders were viewed with caution. Strangers disrupted the social fabric. This did not mean constant hostility, but trust had to be earned. In a world where survival depended on cooperation, unfamiliarity carried risk. Despite these boundaries, medieval people were not closed-minded in the way modern stereotypes suggest. Curiosity existed. News from distant places was eagerly received. Pilgrimages, markets, and seasonal labor exposed people to ideas beyond their immediate world. Meaning was not derived from self-expression or personal fulfillment, but from stability, continuity, and belonging. A good life was one lived properly within one's role, fulfilling obligations and maintaining harmony. This worldview did not eliminate suffering, but it provided a framework for endurance. People understood hardship as part of a larger order. This belief allowed them to continue to rebuild and to persist across generations. In the final section, we will step back and reflect on what the medieval world reveals about humanity itself, not as a distant, primitive past, but as a mirror that challenges modern assumptions about progress, comfort, and meaning. When modern audiences look back at the medieval world, it is often with a sense of distance that feels absolute. The centuries that separate the present from the Middle Ages are imagined as a wall dividing two fundamentally different kinds of people. Yet when examined closely, medieval life reveals not a foreign humanity, but one shaped by different constraints, expectations, and measures of meaning. Medieval people were not ignorant of hardship, nor were they unaware of injustice or suffering. What distinguished their experience was not a lack of awareness, but a different relationship to uncertainty. The medieval world offered no promise that tomorrow would be easier than today. Stability, when achieved, was itself a success. Memory played a central role in how medieval communities understood themselves. History was not an academic discipline, but a living presence. Stories of ancestors, past famines, great storms, or notable figures were preserved through oral tradition. These memories guided behavior, informed decisions, and reinforced caution. Written records existed, but they were limited. Most people encountered history through repetition rather than documentation. This created a culture where continuity mattered more than innovation. Change was acceptable when it preserved order, not when it disrupted it. The pace of medieval life encouraged attentiveness to the present. Without constant access to distant information, people focused on what they could see, touch, and influence. This did not make them narrow-minded, but grounded. The world was experienced at human scale. Work reinforced this perspective. Manual labor demanded awareness of seasons, tools, and physical limits. Skill was accumulated slowly through years of repetition. Expertise was respected because it was visible and proven. There was little separation between knowledge and practice. Community memory also shaped morality. Right and wrong were not abstract principles debated endlessly, but behaviors judged by their effects on collective survival. Actions that threatened harmony were discouraged. Those that reinforced cooperation were praised. Punishment, when applied, often aimed at reintegration rather than exclusion. Permanent removal from the community was a last resort. This reflected an understanding that survival depended on maintaining social cohesion, even when conflict arose. The medieval world also carried a strong sense of inevitability. Birth, aging, illness, and death were accepted as natural stages of life. This acceptance did not eliminate grief, but it reduced the shock that modern societies often experience when faced with mortality. Death was integrated into daily awareness. Cemeteries were located near churches and homes. Prayers for the dead were common. The boundary between the living and the dead was perceived as thinner, less absolute. This proximity to death influenced how life was valued. Joy was found not in accumulation or personal achievement, but in moments of rest, shared meals, successful harvests, and communal celebrations. Happiness was intermittent but deeply felt. The medieval relationship with nature was similarly complex. Nature was neither romanticized nor conquered. It was respected, feared, and negotiated with. Weather was not a background condition, but an active participant in human affairs. Animals were part of daily life in ways modern people rarely experience. Livestock shared space with humans. Animals were valued for labor, food, and survival, not companionship alone. This closeness reinforced awareness of dependence and responsibility. Technology existed, but its adoption was cautious. Tools were improved when they proved reliable. Novelty was less important than durability. This conservatism limited rapid change but increased resilience. The medieval world was not static, but its changes were cumulative rather than revolutionary. Over generations, practices evolved. Villages shifted. Trade expanded. Beliefs adapted. Yet no single generation perceived itself as living at the edge of transformation. From a modern perspective, this can appear stagnant. Yet it also produced societies capable of surviving repeated crises without collapsing entirely. Medieval resilience lay not in growth, but in endurance. Understanding this worldview challenges modern assumptions. Progress is not the only measure of a successful society. Comfort is not the sole indicator of a meaningful life. Stability, belonging, and continuity can sustain communities across centuries. The medieval world reminds us that human needs are shaped by context. What mattered most was not advancement, but balance. Life was judged good when it was predictable, secure, and shared. As we conclude this exploration of ordinary medieval life, it becomes clear that the Middle Ages were not an age of constant darkness, but one of measured light, sufficient for those who lived within it. In the next part, we will turn to how the medieval world slowly gave way to something new, not through sudden rupture, but through subtle shifts that medieval people themselves rarely recognized as the beginning of an ending. The end of the medieval world did not arrive with a single event, nor did it announce itself clearly to those living through it. There was no moment when people collectively realized that an age was ending and another was beginning. Instead, medieval life slowly reshaped itself through pressures that accumulated over time, altering familiar structures without immediately replacing them. One of the earliest forces of change was demographic. Population growth in the High Middle Ages placed increasing strain on land. Fields were divided and subdivided until many families worked plots barely large enough to sustain them. Marginal lands, once avoided, were brought under cultivation, reducing the buffer against poor harvests. This pressure made communities more vulnerable. When climate conditions worsened during the late 13th and early 14th centuries, the consequences were severe. The Great Famine of the early 1300s exposed how tightly balanced medieval subsistence had become. Recovery was slow and uneven. Then came disease on a scale few societies had ever experienced. The Black Death did not simply reduce population. It disrupted assumptions that had structured medieval life for centuries. Labor became scarce. Survivors found themselves with new bargaining power. Old hierarchies were strained, even when authorities attempted to restore them. For the first time, many ordinary people experienced a subtle shift in their relationship to work and reward. Wages rose in some regions. Opportunities appeared where none had existed before. Though these changes were often resisted by elites, they could not be fully reversed. Urban centers expanded in importance. Towns became hubs of trade, administration, and craft production. Money played a greater role in everyday transactions. Barter declined. Market relationships slowly replaced customary obligations in some areas. Education also began to shift. While literacy remained limited, access to learning expanded beyond monasteries. Universities emerged. Written contracts became more common. Record-keeping increased. These developments did not immediately transform daily life, but they introduced new ways of thinking about authority and knowledge. Religious certainty, once largely unquestioned, faced growing strain. Crises undermined confidence in spiritual institutions. Some people began to question why suffering persisted despite devotion. Alternative interpretations emerged, not as widespread rejection, but as quiet doubt. Technology contributed to change without drawing attention to itself. Improvements in printing, navigation, and metallurgy accumulated slowly. Each innovation seemed practical rather than revolutionary, yet together they altered how information traveled and how power was exercised. Military organization evolved as well. Professional armies began to replace feudal levies. Warfare became more centralized and expensive. This reduced the military role of local lords and increased reliance on taxation and administration. The medieval worldview did not disappear overnight. Many customs endured well into the early modern period. Villages continued to operate according to familiar rhythms. People still measured time by seasons and bells. faith remained central to identity. What changed was not daily routine, but underlying assumptions. The idea that the world could be reshaped through planning and innovation began to take root. Authority slowly shifted from tradition toward documentation, from memory toward record. These transitions were uneven. Some regions experienced rapid transformation. Others remained largely medieval in structure for centuries. For most people, life continued to be defined by work, family, and local obligation. Yet beneath this continuity, medieval society was no longer entirely self-contained. External forces increasingly influenced local life. Markets responded to distant conditions. Decisions made far away began to matter more. The medieval world did not fail. It evolved. Its institutions adapted until they no longer resembled their earlier forms. What we call the end of the Middle Ages was, for those who lived through it, simply life continuing under slightly altered conditions. Understanding this gradual transformation reminds us that historical change is often invisible in the moment. People live through endings without knowing them as such. They adapt, adjust, and carry familiar values forward, even as the structures that supported those values shift beneath them. The medieval experience teaches that eras do not vanish. They dissolve into what comes next, leaving traces that persist long after labels change. In the next part, we will examine what medieval life left behind, the habits, assumptions, and systems that continue to shape the modern world in ways we rarely recognize. The medieval world did not vanish when new eras emerged. It lingered in habits, institutions, and ways of thinking that carried forward, often unnoticed, into the modern age. Much of what defines contemporary life was shaped not in moments of sudden innovation, but through gradual refinement of medieval practices. One of the most enduring legacies is the structure of local community. The idea that neighbors share responsibility for common spaces, resources, and norms developed over centuries of medieval cooperation. Modern concepts of local governance, councils, and communal regulation echo these earlier forms. Legal traditions also owe much to medieval custom. The reliance on precedent, testimony, and negotiated settlement has deep roots in village courts and customary law. Even as legal systems became more formalized, they retained assumptions about fairness and obligation shaped by medieval experience. The organization of work bears similar traces. Apprenticeship systems, professional standards, and collective regulation of skills emerged from medieval guilds. While guilds themselves faded, their influence remains visible in certification, training, and trade associations. Timekeeping, too, reflects medieval rhythms. The division of the year into working seasons and holidays, the concept of weekends and feast days, and the association of time with labor patterns all developed within medieval religious and agricultural frameworks. Education evolved from medieval institutions rather than replacing them entirely. Universities grew out of cathedral schools. Academic titles, degrees, and ceremonies retain medieval origins. Even the structure of lectures and examinations reflects practices established centuries ago. Religious influence persists in moral language and social expectations. Concepts of charity, duty, and vocation were shaped by medieval theology. While belief systems diversified, the ethical frameworks they influenced remained embedded in culture. Architecture preserves medieval priorities in stone and space. Town layouts, road networks, and public squares often trace their origins to medieval planning. Churches and civic buildings continue to define landscapes long after their original functions changed. The medieval relationship with nature also left a lasting mark. Practices of land management, property boundaries, and agricultural rotation informed later environmental approaches. Even modern debates about sustainability echo medieval concerns about balance and stewardship. Perhaps the most subtle legacy lies in attitudes toward uncertainty. Medieval societies developed ways to endure instability without expecting resolution. This capacity for adaptation, patience, and collective response remains relevant in times of crisis. Modern societies often assume that progress is linear and inevitable. The medieval past challenges this assumption. It shows that survival does not depend solely on innovation, but on resilience, cooperation, and continuity. The medieval world reminds us that human societies can function without constant acceleration. Life organized around repetition and shared responsibility can sustain meaning across generations. Understanding medieval life is not about nostalgia or critique. It is about recognizing that many modern assumptions are historically contingent. What seems natural today was shaped by choices made long ago under very different conditions. As we reflect on ordinary medieval life, we see a world that was constrained but coherent. Its people did not lack intelligence or creativity. They applied them within the limits they faced. Their solutions were pragmatic, communal, and deeply human. This perspective invites humility. It suggests that future generations may view our own era not as a culmination, but as another phase shaped by circumstances we take for granted. In the final part, we will draw together the themes of this documentary and consider what studying ordinary medieval life reveals about history itself, not as a series of great events, but as the accumulated experience of everyday people. When history is told through the lives of rulers, wars, and dramatic turning points, it can give the impression that the past was shaped only by extraordinary individuals and rare events. Yet the medieval world reminds us that history is sustained far more by ordinary people living ordinary lives, repeating small actions day after day, generation after generation. The medieval experience shows that stability is not accidental. It is constructed through shared expectations, routines, and agreements that rarely appear in written records. Fields were planted not because of royal decree, but because families had learned when and how to plant them. Communities survived not through centralized planning, but through cooperation refined over time. This kind of history is easy to overlook precisely because it lacks spectacle. There are no decisive moments when a village changes the world. Yet, without these countless villages, the world as we know it could not have existed. Ordinary medieval life also challenges the modern assumption that complexity requires constant novelty. Medieval societies were complex without being fast-moving. Their systems relied on memory, habit, and personal knowledge rather than speed or scale. People knew one another. Reputation mattered. Trust was built slowly and could be lost quickly. In such an environment, actions carried long consequences. A poor decision could damage not only an individual, but an entire family. This encouraged caution, compromise, and patience. These were not abstract virtues, but practical necessities. The medieval world also reveals how deeply culture shapes perception. Time felt different because it was measured differently. Risk felt different because it was unavoidable. Comfort was defined not by abundance, but by reliability. A warm meal and a secure roof meant more than variety or convenience. This does not mean medieval life was preferable or superior. Suffering was real. Opportunity was limited. Many lives were short and constrained. But understanding this context prevents the past from being dismissed as simply ignorant or miserable. Historical distance can distort judgment. When modern observers compare medieval life to contemporary standards, they often mistake difference for deficiency. The medieval world was not waiting to become modern. It functioned according to its own logic, shaped by environment, technology, and belief. The study of medieval everyday life also reveals how adaptable humans are. People adjusted to hardship without losing social cohesion. They built meaning within limits rather than demanding those limits disappear. This adaptability is a recurring feature of human history. Another lesson lies in the relationship between individual and community. Medieval identity was collective by necessity. Survival depended on shared labor and mutual support. While this limited personal freedom, it provided security and belonging. Modern societies often struggle to balance individuality with cohesion. The medieval past does not offer a model to copy, but it offers insight into how deeply social structures influence personal experience. The medieval world also complicates the idea of progress. Change occurred, but it was uneven and unpredictable. Improvements in one area often brought new vulnerabilities in another. There was no straight path forward, only adjustments to shifting conditions. This perspective encourages a more nuanced understanding of historical change. Rather than asking when the Middle Ages ended, it may be more useful to ask how medieval ways of living were absorbed, adapted, or abandoned over time. History, viewed this way, becomes less about eras replacing one another and more about layers accumulating. The medieval world is still present, not as a living society, but as a foundation beneath modern assumptions. Even today, echoes remain in how communities respond to crisis, how work is valued, and how people seek meaning in stability rather than constant transformation. Studying ordinary medieval life reminds us that most human experience has never been extraordinary. It has been repetitive, grounded, and shaped by necessity. Yet within this ordinariness lies the substance of history itself. As this documentary continues, we will deepen this perspective by examining specific aspects of daily medieval existence in greater detail. From the rhythms of work and rest, to the experience of aging, to the quiet emotional lives that left few written traces but defined entire generations. To understand ordinary medieval life more fully, it is necessary to look closely at work itself, not as an abstract economic activity, but as the physical and mental framework that shaped nearly every waking hour. Work determined the rhythm of the day, the organization of families, and the limits of possibility. For most medieval people, work began not with choice, but with light. Sunrise marked the start of activity, especially during planting and harvest seasons. There were no alarms or schedules imposed from above. The body learned when to rise by habit and necessity. Daylight was a resource to be used carefully. Agricultural labor dominated rural life. Tasks varied with the seasons, but all required endurance. Plowing, sowing, weeding, harvesting, threshing, and storing grain were physically demanding processes. Tools were simple, often heavy, and required skill to use efficiently. Work was repetitive but not monotonous in the modern sense. The land itself introduced variation. Weather, soil conditions, and animal behavior demanded constant attention. A successful farmer was not one who worked faster, but one who observed carefully and adjusted accordingly. Fatigue was expected. Rest was built into the rhythm of work, but not as leisure. Short pauses, shared meals in the fields, and moments of conversation allowed people to recover enough to continue. Exhaustion was managed, not eliminated. In households, work never truly ended. After field labor came domestic tasks: cooking, repairing tools, caring for animals, and preparing for the next day. Evenings were quieter, but rarely idle. Light from the hearth extended productivity briefly before darkness imposed rest. Craft labor followed a different rhythm but was no less demanding. Blacksmiths, carpenters, weavers, and other artisans worked long hours under physical strain. Their skill reduced waste and increased efficiency, but their bodies bore the cost. Apprenticeship systems ensured the transmission of knowledge. Young people learned by doing, often under strict supervision. Mistakes were corrected immediately. Mastery was achieved slowly, through repetition rather than instruction. Women's labor was continuous and multifaceted. Household management required planning, coordination, and endurance. Food preparation alone was time-consuming, involving grinding grain, managing fires, and preserving supplies. Childcare was integrated into work rather than separated from it. Children learned by watching and assisting. This blurred the boundary between labor and upbringing. Skills were absorbed naturally through participation. Fatigue shaped medieval attitudes toward time. Efficiency was valued, but not speed. Rushing increased risk of injury or error. A steady pace preserved strength across long days and long seasons. Illness and injury disrupted work dramatically. Without surplus labor, the absence of one person could strain an entire household. Communities responded by redistributing tasks temporarily, reinforcing interdependence. Rest days were structured by religious observance. Sundays and feast days provided relief from labor, though rest was not absolute. Necessary tasks continued, but the pace slowed. These pauses reinforced endurance rather than indulgence. Sleep patterns differed from modern expectations. Many medieval people experienced segmented sleep, resting for several hours, waking briefly, then returning to sleep. Nighttime wakefulness was not necessarily considered abnormal. The body adapted to this rhythm. Physical strength developed through constant use. Pain was familiar but not always disabling. Endurance mattered more than comfort. Work shaped identity. A person was known by what they did and how well they did it. Skill earned respect. Reliability mattered. A reputation for diligence could sustain a family's standing for generations. Despite hardship, work also provided meaning. Labor connected individuals to community and purpose. To contribute was to belong. Idleness threatened both survival and identity. Understanding medieval work reminds us that most human history has been lived under physical constraint. The modern separation between work and life would have been incomprehensible. They were the same thing. In the next part, we will examine how medieval people experienced emotion, intimacy, and inner life, aspects rarely documented, yet deeply present beneath the surface of daily routine. The emotional lives of medieval people are difficult to reconstruct, not because emotion was absent, but because it was expressed differently and rarely recorded in personal terms. Letters, diaries, and private reflections were uncommon among ordinary people. What remains are traces, gestures, rituals, and behaviors that hint at inner experience without naming it directly. Medieval emotions were shaped by proximity. People lived closely together, worked together, and shared space constantly. Privacy, as modern societies understand it, was rare. Emotional life unfolded within a communal setting, observed and influenced by others. Love existed, but it was not idealized as a personal journey toward self-fulfillment. Affection developed through familiarity, shared labor, and mutual dependence. Marriage was not primarily romantic, yet intimacy grew through routine and cooperation. Expressions of grief were public. Death was mourned collectively. Ritualized lamentation, prayer, and remembrance allowed emotion to be shared rather than internalized. Grief was not hidden. It was acknowledged and managed communally. Fear was a constant companion, but it was not paralyzing. Uncertainty was expected. The future was not assumed to be controllable. This acceptance reduced anxiety, even as it increased resignation. Joy appeared in brief, intense moments. Festivals, successful harvests, births, and communal gatherings created emotional contrast against daily labor. These moments mattered precisely because they were limited. Shame and honor regulated behavior. Reputation mattered more than internal self-concept. Actions were judged by their impact on community standing. Emotional restraint was valued, not because feeling was discouraged, but because expression had social consequences. Anger was real but often constrained. Public conflict risked damaging relationships essential for survival. Disputes were channeled through formal processes or mediated by elders. Affection between parents and children was deep, though often understated. High mortality did not eliminate attachment. It shaped it. Love coexisted with awareness of loss. Friendship existed within work and kinship networks. Emotional bonds were forged through shared hardship. Loyalty mattered more than confession or emotional disclosure. Spiritual emotion played a central role. Fear of judgment, hope for salvation, gratitude, and humility shaped inner life. Faith offered a language for emotions that could not otherwise be expressed. Guilt was managed through ritual rather than introspection. Confession provided structure for moral emotion. Forgiveness was externalized, reducing the burden of internal conflict. Desire was acknowledged but regulated. Sexuality existed within strict moral frameworks, yet human behavior rarely conformed perfectly to ideals. Communities balanced enforcement with tolerance. Aging altered emotional experience. Elders reflected on life through memory rather than future planning. Authority softened into counsel. Emotional intensity shifted toward acceptance. Silence was not emptiness. Moments of quiet, prayer, and reflection were woven into daily routine. These provided space for inner life without isolating the individual. The medieval inner world was not less complex than the modern one. It was structured differently. Emotion was experienced relationally, not privately. Meaning came from belonging rather than self-expression. Understanding medieval emotional life challenges modern assumptions about fulfillment. It suggests that emotional richness does not require constant articulation. Feeling can exist within action, routine, and shared experience. In the next part, we will explore how medieval people faced the final stage of life, aging, decline, and death, not as an interruption, but as an expected passage integrated into daily awareness. In the medieval world, aging was not a distant abstraction. It was visible, familiar, and expected. People lived in close proximity across generations, and the signs of physical decline were observed daily. Elders were not hidden from view or separated into specialized institutions. They remained embedded within households and communities for as long as they were able. Life expectancy figures, often misunderstood, obscure this reality. While average life expectancy was low due to high infant mortality, many who survived childhood lived into their 50s or 60s. Old age was recognized not by a number, but by declining strength and endurance. There was no clear boundary between working life and old age. People worked until they could not. As physical capacity diminished, roles shifted. Elders contributed through supervision, memory, childcare, and counsel. Experience carried value even when strength faded. Dependence was accepted as part of the life cycle. A person who had labored for decades was expected to receive care when no longer able to work fully. This expectation was informal, rooted in kinship and reciprocity rather than law. Illness in old age was common and rarely treated as exceptional. Pain, stiffness, and weakness were familiar conditions. Remedies focused on comfort rather than cure. Endurance was admired, not because suffering was virtuous, but because it was unavoidable. Death was not segregated from life. People died at home, surrounded by family and neighbors. The dying process was communal. Farewells were spoken. Final prayers were offered. The presence of death was integrated into domestic space. Preparation for death was considered prudent. Wills, when possible, were arranged. Debts were acknowledged. Relationships were reconciled. Death was treated not as a medical failure, but as a moral and social transition. Funeral rituals reinforced continuity. The community gathered not only to mourn, but to reaffirm shared beliefs and obligations. Burial grounds were familiar places, visited regularly. The dead remained part of communal memory. Grief was expressed openly, but it followed structured forms. Mourning had duration, expectation, and eventual resolution. Life resumed not because loss was forgotten, but because continuity was necessary. Fear of death existed, but it was tempered by familiarity. Death was not an interruption to life's narrative. It was its expected conclusion. This awareness shaped priorities. Urgency was measured differently. Spiritual belief offered reassurance. The afterlife was imagined not as abstract, but as a continuation of moral order. Judgment, mercy, and remembrance framed how death was understood. Violent death, though less common than often assumed, carried additional weight. Sudden loss disrupted ritual preparation. Communities responded with heightened anxiety and collective response. Children encountered death early. This did not make them indifferent. It shaped their understanding of life's fragility. Loss was normalized but never trivialized. Memory served as a bridge between life and death. Stories preserved the presence of the deceased. Names were repeated. Land and tools carried association. The past remained active. The medieval approach to death challenges modern avoidance. Rather than postponing awareness, medieval societies integrated mortality into daily life. This did not eliminate sorrow, but it reduced denial. Aging and death were not viewed as failures. They were expected passages within a moral framework that emphasized continuity over permanence. Understanding this perspective reveals how deeply different medieval priorities were. Life was not defined by longevity, but by fulfillment of role. A life well lived was one that maintained balance until its end. In the next part, we will step back once more and consider how the totality of medieval daily life, work, emotion, belief, aging, and death, forms a coherent system that sustained human societies for centuries. When the many elements of medieval daily life are considered together, a pattern emerges that is often missed when history is examined in fragments. Work, belief, community, emotion, aging, and death were not separate domains. They formed a coherent system, each reinforcing the others in ways that allowed medieval societies to endure across centuries of instability. At the center of this system was predictability. Medieval life offered few guarantees, but it offered patterns. Seasons returned, rituals repeated, roles were inherited. This repetition created psychological stability even when material conditions were harsh. The absence of rapid change reduced cognitive strain. People were not required to constantly adapt to new technologies, social expectations, or identities. Instead, adaptation occurred slowly across generations. This allowed knowledge to be transmitted reliably through observation and imitation. Social roles were clear if unequal. While hierarchy limited mobility, it reduced ambiguity. Individuals understood what was expected of them and what they could expect in return. This clarity shaped decision-making and reduced conflict born of uncertainty. Community enforcement replaced centralized authority. Norms were maintained not by distant institutions, but by neighbors who shared consequences. This proximity made behavior meaningful. Actions were visible, remembered, and responded to. Belief systems provided explanation without requiring proof. Faith did not eliminate doubt, but it offered coherence. Suffering was not random. It fit within a larger moral order. This interpretation made endurance possible. Labor connected individuals to time and place. Work was not abstracted from survival. The results of effort were tangible. This reinforced a sense of agency even within constraint. Emotion was managed through structure. Rituals gave form to grief. Celebration had designated times. Conflict followed recognized channels. Emotional life was not suppressed. It was contained. Aging reinforced continuity. Elders embodied memory. They linked past practice to present action. Decline was visible, but so was contribution beyond strength. Death closed the system rather than rupturing it. Ritual ensured that loss did not destabilize the living. Memory absorbed the dead back into community identity. None of this implies harmony or justice in the modern sense. Hardship was real. Inequality was severe. Violence existed. Yet the system functioned because it aligned expectations with reality. Modern observers often focus on what medieval people lacked. What is equally important is what they possessed: coherence, shared meaning, and resilience shaped by limitation rather than abundance. This coherence helps explain why medieval societies did not collapse under repeated crises. They absorbed shock through social bonds rather than technological solutions. It also explains why change, when it came, was disruptive. The gradual unraveling of medieval coherence created uncertainty long before new systems stabilized. Understanding medieval daily life as a system rather than a collection of deficiencies allows a more accurate assessment of its success and limitations. History, viewed this way, becomes less about progress and more about adaptation. Societies survive not because they advance rapidly, but because they align their values with their conditions. The medieval world aligned itself with scarcity, unpredictability, and local dependence. It did not eliminate these conditions. It organized around them. This perspective challenges modern assumptions about what makes a society functional. Speed, choice, and expansion are not universal goods. Stability, repetition, and belonging can be equally powerful. As this documentary continues, we will explore how moments of tension, rebellion, belief shifts, and cultural friction tested this medieval coherence and revealed both its strength and its limits. Even within the coherence of medieval daily life, tension was never absent. Order existed, but it was not universally accepted without question. Beneath routines and rituals, medieval societies contained currents of resistance, negotiation, and quiet defiance that rarely appear in grand historical narratives. Most medieval resistance was not revolutionary. It did not aim to overturn the social order. Instead, it sought relief, adjustment, or fairness within existing structures. Ordinary people resisted when obligations became unbearable or when expectations broke the fragile balance that sustained daily life. Economic pressure was a frequent source of tension. Excessive rents, forced labor, or arbitrary demands strained households already operating at the limits of survival. When negotiation failed, resistance followed, often subtly. Refusal to comply could take many forms. Work slowed, obligations were delayed, records were avoided, boundaries were disputed. These actions were rarely dramatic, but they were effective. They allowed communities to push back without provoking violent response. Collective action emerged when pressure was shared. Villagers gathered to petition authorities, appeal to custom, or invoke religious justification. These actions framed resistance as defense of tradition rather than rebellion. Open revolts did occur, but they were exceptional and risky. When they happened, they were often responses to cumulative grievances rather than single events. Even then, participants frequently emphasized loyalty to ideals rather than opposition to authority itself. Religious belief sometimes became a language of resistance. Appeals to divine justice challenged earthly abuse. Alternative interpretations of faith offered moral grounds for dissent without rejecting belief entirely. Women participated in resistance in ways often overlooked. They defended household rights, challenged unfair treatment, and mobilized social pressure. Their roles within family and community networks gave them influence that formal records rarely acknowledge. Youth also tested boundaries. Apprentices challenged masters. Young laborers resisted excessive discipline. These conflicts were negotiated within established frameworks, reinforcing rather than destroying social order. Tension existed within households as well. Authority was exercised, contested, and renegotiated daily. Family life was not uniformly harmonious. Yet conflict was managed through familiarity rather than separation. The legal system provided space for challenge. Courts heard complaints. Testimony allowed grievances to be voiced. While outcomes favored the powerful, the process itself acknowledged limits to authority. Custom was a powerful tool. Appeals to how things had always been done constrained arbitrary change. Memory became a form of resistance, preserving balance through precedent. Silence itself could be defiant. Refusing to participate fully, withholding enthusiasm, or maintaining distance signaled dissatisfaction without confrontation. These forms of resistance were difficult to punish. Understanding medieval tension reveals a society more dynamic than stereotypes suggest. Order was not imposed unilaterally. It was negotiated continually through everyday interactions. This negotiation preserved stability by allowing flexibility. Authority that ignored these limits risked collapse. Wise governance accommodated resistance without naming it as such. The medieval world thus functioned not through unquestioned obedience, but through managed tension. This balance allowed endurance across generations. In the next part, we will explore how belief systems themselves adapted under pressure, how faith, doubt, and reinterpretation shaped medieval thought without dismantling the structures that sustained daily life. Belief in the medieval world was not static, even when its outward forms appeared unchanged. Faith structured daily life, but it was continually interpreted, negotiated, and adapted in response to experience. Medieval people did not simply inherit belief. They lived with it, tested it, and reshaped it quietly over time. Religious practice was embedded in routine. Prayer marked the day. The church calendar ordered the year. Rituals accompanied birth, marriage, illness, and death. These practices created continuity and meaning, yet they did not eliminate uncertainty or doubt. Doubt existed, but it rarely took the form of outright rejection. Instead, it appeared as questioning, reinterpretation, or selective emphasis. People asked why suffering persisted, why prayers went unanswered, and why injustice endured. These questions did not necessarily weaken faith. They often deepened it by forcing adaptation. Clergy played a mediating role. Parish priests translated doctrine into daily guidance. Their influence depended not only on authority, but on trust. A priest who understood local conditions could shape belief in ways that resonated with lived experience. Popular belief blended official teaching with local tradition. Saints were venerated for practical reasons. Shrines were visited for healing, protection, and reassurance. This pragmatism did not contradict faith. It grounded it. Heresy, often portrayed as widespread rebellion, was relatively rare among ordinary people. Most divergence occurred within accepted boundaries. Alternative practices coexisted with orthodoxy, tolerated as long as they did not threaten social cohesion. Crisis intensified belief. During famine or plague, religious observance increased. Processions, fasting, and communal prayer offered structure when explanation failed. Faith provided a shared response to fear. At the same time, crisis exposed limits. When suffering continued despite devotion, belief systems adapted. Emphasis shifted from prevention to endurance, from reward to meaning. Education within religious institutions introduced new forms of thought. Scholastic inquiry encouraged questioning within controlled frameworks. Debate was permitted as long as conclusions reinforced order. Mysticism offered another outlet. Personal religious experience allowed individuals to seek meaning beyond institutional mediation. These experiences rarely rejected faith. They personalized it. Belief also reinforced social roles. Duty, obedience, and charity were framed as spiritual obligations. This integration stabilized society, but it also created tension when authority failed to uphold moral expectations. Lay people were not passive recipients of belief. They interpreted sermons, shared stories, and adapted practice. Faith circulated orally, shaped by memory and community. Children learned belief through imitation rather than instruction. Ritual familiarity preceded understanding. Faith became part of identity before it became doctrine. Over time, belief systems absorbed change. New devotions emerged. Old practices faded. Continuity was maintained through adaptation rather than rigidity. Understanding medieval belief as lived experience rather than fixed doctrine reveals its flexibility. Faith endured not because it resisted change, but because it accommodated it. This adaptability helped sustain medieval coherence even as external pressures mounted. Belief did not prevent transformation. It shaped how transformation was understood. In the next part, we will examine how knowledge itself was preserved, transmitted, and limited in the medieval world, and how the boundaries of knowing shaped daily life. Knowledge in the medieval world was unevenly distributed, but it was not absent. What distinguished medieval knowledge from modern understanding was not its lack of sophistication, but its boundaries. Knowing was shaped by access, necessity, and tradition rather than by expansion for its own sake. Most medieval people did not seek knowledge beyond what was required for survival and belonging. This was not apathy, it was practicality. Learning demanded time, resources, and opportunity. When daily life required constant labor, curiosity was directed toward what mattered immediately. Practical knowledge was extensive. Farmers understood soil, weather patterns, animal behavior, and seasonal timing with precision born of experience. Craftsmen mastered materials, tools, and techniques through repetition and observation. This knowledge was rarely written down, but it was deeply reliable. Oral transmission preserved information across generations. Skills were taught by demonstration rather than explanation. Memory played a central role. Forgetting carried consequences, reinforcing careful attention. Written knowledge existed within limited spaces. Monasteries, churches, and later universities preserved texts and learning. Literacy conferred power, not because it revealed truth alone, but because it controlled record and interpretation. Books were rare and valuable. Texts were copied by hand. Access was restricted. Reading was often communal, with one person reading aloud to others. Knowledge circulated slowly and selectively. Authority shaped what was considered worth knowing. Religious doctrine framed cosmology, morality, and history. Classical texts were preserved, but interpreted through theological lenses. Contradiction was managed through synthesis rather than rejection. Ignorance was not universally condemned. Not knowing was often accepted as natural. Mystery was part of the worldview. Certain questions were believed to be beyond human reach, reserved for divine understanding. This acceptance of limits reduced frustration. When answers were unavailable, endurance replaced explanation. Meaning did not depend on complete understanding. Education for ordinary people occurred through participation rather than abstraction. Learning how to live mattered more than learning why the world functioned as it did. Rumor and misinformation existed, but their impact was localized. Without mass communication, false ideas spread slowly and were corrected through experience. Truth was tested against survival rather than argument. Travel expanded knowledge cautiously. Pilgrimages, trade, and migration introduced new ideas, but they were filtered through existing frameworks. Novelty was evaluated for usefulness, not fascination. Curiosity existed, but it was bounded. Medieval people wondered about the world, but they did not expect mastery over it. Control was limited. Adaptation was valued. Knowledge reinforced hierarchy. Those who controlled records, law, and doctrine wielded influence. Yet practical knowledge empowered ordinary people within their own spheres. The medieval world was not anti-intellectual. It was selective. Learning served stability rather than transformation. As pressures increased, these boundaries began to strain. New technologies and expanding trade challenged assumptions about what could be known and shared. Yet even as knowledge expanded, medieval habits of caution persisted. Understanding was absorbed slowly, evaluated through tradition. This balance between knowing and accepting ignorance contributed to resilience. People acted effectively without demanding certainty. In the next part, we will explore how medieval people encountered the wider world, travel, distance, and the limits of imagination, and how these encounters shaped their sense of reality. For most medieval people, the world was small, not because imagination was limited, but because movement was costly, slow, and uncertain. Distance was experienced not in miles, but in effort, risk, and time. The further one traveled, the more unfamiliar and unpredictable life became. The majority of medieval individuals lived their entire lives within a narrow geographic radius. A journey of 20 or 30 miles could feel significant. Roads were often poorly maintained. Travel depended on weather, daylight, and physical endurance. When travel did occur, it was purposeful. Merchants moved goods. Pilgrims sought spiritual merit. Messengers carried information for authorities. Casual travel was rare. Each journey required preparation and acceptance of risk. Travel exposed people to difference. Customs, accents, clothing, and laws shifted from region to region. These differences reinforced local identity. Home was defined not only by familiarity, but by contrast with elsewhere. The wider world was known primarily through stories. Tales of distant lands circulated through markets, churches, and taverns. These stories mixed observation with imagination. Accuracy mattered less than meaning. Maps existed, but they were symbolic rather than navigational. They represented spiritual and moral order more than physical geography. The world was understood conceptually, not measured precisely. Foreignness carried both curiosity and fear. Strangers brought news, goods, and opportunity, but also uncertainty. Trust was negotiated carefully. Hospitality existed, but it was structured by rules. Pilgrimage offered a sanctioned form of travel. Religious journeys allowed ordinary people to leave familiar spaces without social penalty. These experiences broadened perspective, even when destinations were relatively close. Trade routes connected regions unevenly. Some villages were isolated. Others were surprisingly integrated into wider networks. Access to trade influenced prosperity and exposure to new ideas. Maritime travel expanded horizons more dramatically. Coastal communities encountered foreign goods and people more frequently. The sea was both connector and barrier, feared and relied upon. Information moved slowly. News traveled by word of mouth. Events weeks or months away arrived as rumor. This delay shaped perception. The present dominated awareness. The limits of travel reinforced acceptance of local authority. Distant rulers felt abstract. Immediate leaders mattered more. Governance was experienced face to face. Yet the medieval imagination was not confined. Biblical narratives, classical stories, and legends populated mental maps. The unknown was filled with meaning rather than emptiness. Encounters with difference prompted adaptation. New crops, tools, and practices were adopted cautiously. Change entered daily life incrementally through contact. Distance shaped risk. Leaving home meant leaving support networks. Illness or injury while traveling could be fatal. This reinforced caution. Return from travel carried prestige. Those who had seen beyond the village brought stories and insight. Experience conferred status. Understanding medieval distance reveals how perception shapes reality. The world felt larger because it was harder to reach. Local life felt complete because it was self-sufficient. As travel and communication gradually expanded, these perceptions began to shift. The edges of the medieval world moved outward, altering how people understood possibility. In the next part, we will examine how these expanding horizons interacted with daily routine, subtly changing expectations without dismantling the structures of medieval life. As the medieval world slowly became more connected, daily life did not change overnight. Fields were still planted by hand, families still worked together, and villages still marked time by seasons and bells. Yet beneath this surface continuity, expectations began to shift in subtle ways that medieval people themselves rarely articulated. Exposure to new goods altered perceptions of value. Objects that arrived through trade, finer cloth, unfamiliar spices, improved tools, did not immediately replace local products, but they introduced comparison. People became aware that life could be arranged differently, even if those alternatives remained out of reach. Money played an increasing role in this shift. As coin circulation expanded, obligations once fulfilled through labor or goods were sometimes converted into payments. This did not eliminate traditional relationships, but it changed how they were experienced. Exchange became more flexible, but also more impersonal. Choice, limited though it was, began to matter more. A craftsman could sometimes choose clients. A laborer might seek better terms elsewhere. These small options altered how people thought about obligation and reward. Expectations of fairness also evolved. Custom remained powerful, but written agreements and records introduced new standards. Disputes increasingly referenced documents alongside memory. Authority became something that could be cited rather than simply embodied. Education, though still restricted, began to influence broader culture. Ideas developed in universities filtered slowly into sermons, legal practice, and administration. Knowledge became something that could travel independently of people. This circulation of ideas did not undermine medieval coherence immediately. Instead, it created tension between tradition and possibility. Familiar routines continued to provide stability, but they were no longer the only imaginable way to live. Generational differences became more noticeable. Younger people encountered a slightly wider world than their elders had known. This did not produce rebellion, but it did shape aspiration. Urban influence extended outward. Town practices affected surrounding villages through markets and law. Rural life remained distinct, but it was no longer entirely insulated. Religious life adapted as well. New devotions reflected changing concerns. Preaching addressed emerging anxieties about money, work, and morality. Faith responded to lived experience rather than remaining fixed. The pace of life remained slow, but awareness expanded. People knew more about events beyond their immediate surroundings, even if that knowledge arrived late and incomplete. These shifts were uneven. Many communities remained largely unchanged for generations. Others experienced gradual reorientation toward markets, records, and external authority. Importantly, medieval people did not interpret these changes as progress or decline. They were simply adjustments to conditions. Life remained focused on survival, belonging, and continuity. What changed most was not behavior, but imagination. The range of what seemed possible expanded slightly. This expansion did not dismantle medieval life, but it prepared the ground for future transformation. Understanding this phase reveals how historical change often begins. Not with disruption, but with awareness. Not with rejection, but with comparison. The medieval world did not collapse under these pressures. It absorbed them until its coherence slowly transformed into something new. In the next part, we will examine how these shifting expectations affected authority, obedience, and governance at the local level, and how medieval order adapted without fully breaking. Authority in the medieval world was experienced close to home. While kings, emperors, and distant rulers existed in theory, the power that shaped daily life was local, familiar, and personal. Governance was not an abstract system imposed from afar, but a set of relationships negotiated face to face. Most people encountered authority through a small number of figures: a local lord, a parish priest, village elders, or town officials. These individuals were known personally. Their power depended as much on reputation and cooperation as on formal right. Obedience was not blind. It was conditional, shaped by expectation of protection, fairness, and continuity. Authority that respected custom was accepted. Authority that violated it invited resistance. Custom functioned as an unwritten constitution. It defined obligations, privileges, and limits. Lords and officials who ignored custom risked losing legitimacy, even if they retained force. Local courts embodied this balance. They provided a space where authority could be challenged without overthrow. Complaints were heard. Witnesses spoke. Memory and precedent mattered. Justice was imperfect, but it was visible. Punishment reinforced authority symbolically. Public acts reminded communities of boundaries, but they also reaffirmed shared norms. Excessive punishment threatened order rather than strengthening it. Taxation, when introduced or increased, often sparked tension. People accepted obligation when it aligned with tradition. New demands required justification. Authority learned to negotiate rather than dictate. Governance relied on participation. Villagers served as jurors, witnesses, and officials. This involvement reinforced legitimacy. Rule was something people enacted, not merely endured. Religion supported governance by framing authority as moral responsibility. Rulers were expected to govern justly. Failure was interpreted not only as political weakness, but as moral fault. Yet governance adapted to change. Written records, surveys, and standardized procedures slowly entered local administration. These tools increased reach but reduced intimacy. As authority became more distant, obedience became more conditional. People learned to navigate systems rather than relationships. This shift altered expectations without immediately transforming daily life. Local governance remained resilient because it absorbed new forms while retaining old practices. Villages adapted records to custom rather than abandoning tradition outright. Conflict between local and central authority increased gradually. Communities defended autonomy using language of loyalty rather than rebellion. Understanding medieval governance reveals a system maintained through consent as much as coercion. Power endured because it was negotiated continuously. This balance would eventually strain as central authority expanded. But for centuries, medieval order rested on proximity, familiarity, and shared expectation. In the next part, we will examine how memory, storytelling, and tradition preserved this balance, and how forgetting became as powerful as remembering. In the medieval world, memory was not merely personal recollection. It was a social force. Without widespread literacy or permanent records, communities relied on shared memory to preserve order, identity, and continuity. What was remembered shaped what was possible. What was forgotten quietly disappeared. Tradition functioned as a living archive. Customs were preserved through repetition rather than documentation. People learned how to act by observing how things had always been done. This continuity created stability, but it also limited change. Storytelling played a central role in this process. Stories explained origins, justified rules, and reinforced values. They did not need to be historically precise to be effective. Meaning mattered more than accuracy. Stories about ancestors, past hardships, or local miracles reinforced belonging. They reminded listeners that their community had endured before and could endure again. Memory became a tool of resilience. For ordinary people, history was local. Events mattered insofar as they affected familiar places and people. Distant occurrences entered memory only when they altered daily life. Forgetting was equally powerful. Practices that no longer served survival faded quietly. No formal decision was required. Absence replaced remembrance. This selective memory allowed medieval societies to adapt without acknowledging transformation. Change occurred by omission rather than confrontation. Ritual reinforced memory physically. Repeated actions anchored stories in space and time. Annual festivals reactivated shared narratives, ensuring continuity across generations. Songs, proverbs, and sayings condensed experience into easily remembered forms. These fragments carried practical wisdom, guiding behavior without explanation. Elders served as custodians of memory. Their authority rested not only on age, but on recall. They remembered past agreements, boundaries, and crises. Memory also regulated conflict. Appeals to what had been done before constrained innovation and abuse. Tradition limited power by invoking precedent. At the same time, memory could be contested. Different versions of the past supported different claims. Authority often depended on whose memory prevailed. Written records gradually altered this balance. Documents fixed memory, reducing flexibility. What was written became harder to reinterpret. This shift increased stability but reduced adaptability. As record-keeping expanded, storytelling did not disappear. It adapted. Oral tradition filled gaps left by formal documentation. The medieval reliance on memory fostered attentiveness. People listened carefully, knowing information might not be repeated. Attention itself became a survival skill. Understanding this memory culture reveals how medieval societies sustained coherence without modern information systems. They relied on human connection rather than permanence. As memory practices shifted, medieval life adjusted. The balance between remembering and forgetting changed, shaping the transition toward new forms of order. In the next part, we will examine how time itself was experienced in the medieval world, not as an abstract measure, but as a lived rhythm shaping expectation and endurance. Time in the medieval world was not an abstract measurement divided into precise units. It was a lived experience, shaped by light, season, sound, and habit. People did not manage time, they inhabited it. This difference fundamentally shaped how medieval life was understood and endured. The most immediate measure of time was daylight. Sunrise and sunset governed work, travel, and rest. The length of the day changed with the seasons, altering the pace of life. Summer allowed long hours of labor. Winter enforced stillness. Church bells structured communal awareness of time. They marked prayer hours, gatherings, and transitions. Even those who did not attend services regularly oriented their day around these sounds. Time was heard as much as it was seen. Calendars existed, but they mattered less than cycles. The agricultural year defined expectation. Planting, harvesting, and preparation followed patterns learned through observation rather than calculation. Religious festivals punctuated the year, creating contrast within repetition. Feast days interrupted labor. Fasting periods imposed restraint. These rhythms balanced endurance with relief. Time was experienced collectively. People shared schedules, seasons, and routines. This synchronization reinforced cohesion. Life moved at a common pace. Urgency was situational rather than constant. Certain moments demanded speed. Most did not. The absence of strict deadlines reduced anxiety but increased dependence on habit. Waiting was normal. Processes unfolded slowly. Growth took time. Repair required patience. This acceptance shaped emotional resilience. The future was anticipated cautiously. Plans were made, but expectations remained flexible. Whether Illness and authority could disrupt intention at any moment. Memory connected past and future. Experience informed anticipation. People prepared for winter because they remembered winter. Aging reinforced awareness of time's passage. Physical change marked years more clearly than calendars. Time was felt in the body. Sleep patterns reflected this rhythm. Nights were longer in winter, shorter in summer. Rest adapted to darkness rather than clock hours. Mechanical clocks eventually entered towns, but they did not immediately alter experience. Precision mattered less than coordination. Bells continued to matter more than minutes. Time discipline, as understood today, was absent. Efficiency was valued, but not acceleration. Steadiness preserved strength. Understanding medieval time reveals why life felt stable despite hardship. When change occurs slowly, endurance becomes possible. As new technologies altered timekeeping, expectations began to shift. But for centuries, medieval life unfolded within rhythms that shaped perception itself. In the next part, we will examine how medieval people understood happiness, satisfaction, and what it meant to live a good life within these rhythms. Happiness in the medieval world was not pursued as a permanent emotional state. It was not framed as a right, a goal, or a measure of success. Instead, it appeared as a momentary condition, experienced within limits and shaped by circumstance. The medieval idea of a good life rested less on feeling and more on order, balance, and endurance. Satisfaction was closely tied to stability. A year without famine, illness, or conflict was itself a success. Security, even when modest, carried meaning. The absence of crisis mattered more than the presence of pleasure. Medieval people did not expect life to be fair in the modern sense. Inequality was accepted as part of the natural order. What mattered was whether obligations were predictable and whether survival was possible within one's role. Contentment emerged from familiarity. Knowing what to expect from the land, the community, and the seasons reduced anxiety. Repetition created reassurance. Change, even when positive, could feel threatening. Joy was found in contrast. After long periods of labor, celebration felt intense. After scarcity, abundance mattered deeply. Pleasure was meaningful because it was not constant. Shared experience amplified emotion. Festivals, weddings, and communal meals transformed individual feeling into collective memory. Happiness was social rather than private. Achievement was measured locally. Doing one's work well, maintaining household order, and preserving family reputation constituted success. There was little pressure to distinguish oneself beyond one's role. Spiritual fulfillment mattered more than emotional satisfaction. Living rightly, fulfilling duty, and preparing for death framed the good life. Emotional states were secondary to moral condition. Suffering did not invalidate life's value. Hardship was expected. Meaning came from endurance, not avoidance. This perspective did not glorify pain, but it integrated it. Gratitude was expressed through ritual rather than reflection. Prayers of thanks followed harvests and recoveries. Appreciation was communal, not introspective. Ambition existed, but it was constrained. Desire for improvement focused on security rather than transformation. The idea of reinventing one's life was largely absent. Happiness was not individualized. People did not seek fulfillment apart from community. Isolation was more frightening than dissatisfaction. This framework shaped emotional resilience. When happiness was not expected constantly, disappointment carried less weight. Loss was endured rather than internalized. Understanding medieval satisfaction challenges modern assumptions. Well-being does not require constant positivity. Stability, belonging, and meaning can sustain life even under constraint. As expectations slowly changed in later centuries, this balance shifted. Desire expanded, comparison increased, satisfaction became more fragile. The medieval good life reminds us that happiness is historically shaped. What feels necessary today was not always imagined as such. In the next part, we will examine how medieval people understood failure, misfortune, and personal responsibility, and how blame was distributed within a world governed by uncertainty. Failure in the medieval world was understood differently than it is today. It was not primarily interpreted as a personal flaw or a lack of effort. Instead, failure was seen as a condition shaped by circumstance, fortune, and forces beyond individual control. This perspective influenced how blame, responsibility, and compassion were distributed within medieval communities. Misfortune was expected. Crops failed, animals died, illness struck without warning. These events were not interpreted as evidence of incompetence alone. They were understood as part of a world governed by uncertainty. Responsibility was collective as much as individual. When a household struggled, neighbors often recognized shared vulnerability. Assistance was not purely charitable. It was reciprocal. Today's misfortune could be tomorrow's shared burden. At the same time, standards existed. Negligence was recognized. A farmer who ignored seasonal knowledge or a craftsman who worked carelessly could be blamed. Responsibility lay in effort and attention, not outcome. This distinction reduced shame. Failure that resulted from forces beyond control did not define a person's worth. Reputation depended more on conduct than on success. Religious interpretation reinforced this view. Suffering was not always punishment. It could be trial, mystery, or part of divine order. This framing limited internalized guilt. Confession addressed moral failure, not misfortune. Wrongdoing required acknowledgement. Hardship did not. This separation allowed people to endure loss without moral collapse. Public response to failure was measured. Excessive condemnation threatened social cohesion. Communities balanced accountability with mercy. Debt illustrates this balance. Indebtedness was common. Inability to repay was not always stigmatized. Negotiation and adjustment were expected. Harsh enforcement risked destabilizing the community. Illness was treated similarly. The sick were not blamed for their condition. Care, when possible, was communal. Exclusion occurred only when danger outweighed obligation. Children learned this framework early. Failure was corrected, not condemned. Learning involved error. Mastery required patience. This approach fostered resilience. When outcomes were uncertain, focus shifted to behavior within one's control. Attention, diligence, and cooperation mattered more than results. Modern societies often equate failure with identity. Medieval societies separated action from essence. A person could fail without being a failure. This distinction shaped emotional endurance. Shame existed, but it was bounded. People recovered reputation through effort and time. Understanding medieval failure reveals a world less obsessed with optimization and more concerned with survival and balance. As expectations expanded in later periods, tolerance for failure decreased. Outcomes mattered more. Responsibility became individualized. The medieval approach offers insight into alternative ways of assigning blame and distributing compassion. In the next part, we will examine how medieval people understood danger, safety, and risk, and how they lived daily life without the illusion of control. For medieval people, danger was not an occasional interruption to life. It was an ever-present condition. Safety, as a stable and guaranteed state, did not exist in the way it does in modern societies. Instead, life unfolded within a constant awareness that harm, loss, or disruption could arrive at any moment. This did not produce continuous fear, produced adaptation. Medieval societies learned how to live with risk rather than attempting to eliminate it. Danger was managed through habit, custom, and collective response rather than through prevention alone. Physical danger was part of daily labor. Farming, construction, and craftwork exposed the body to injury. Tools were sharp. Animals were unpredictable. Medical care was limited. Caution developed through experience, not regulation. Environmental risk was unavoidable. Storms, floods, droughts, and cold were accepted as natural forces. Preparation mitigated impact, but control was impossible. Storage, shelter, and shared labor reduced vulnerability without eliminating it. Disease represented an invisible threat. Illness appeared suddenly and spread unpredictably. Without understanding cause, medieval people focused on response. Care, prayer, isolation, and ritual provided structure when explanation failed. Fire posed constant danger. Homes were built from flammable materials. Cooking required open flame. Vigilance was a daily responsibility. Communities developed rules and routines to reduce risk, but destruction remained possible. Violence existed, but it was not constant. Most people lived without direct exposure to warfare. When violence occurred, it disrupted deeply precisely because it was not routine. Communities responded collectively, reinforcing solidarity. Crime was understood relationally. Offenders were known, not anonymous. This familiarity constrained behavior. Risk was reduced through reputation rather than surveillance. Travel amplified danger. Leaving home meant losing protection. Roads carried risk of injury, theft, or illness. Travel was undertaken with caution and purpose. Children learned risk early. They were taught what to avoid, not through instruction alone, but through observation. Survival skills were absorbed naturally. Safety was communal. Protection came from belonging. Isolation increased vulnerability. Mutual aid reduced risk more effectively than individual strength. Belief provided psychological safety. Faith offered explanation and reassurance. Acceptance reduced panic. Danger was framed within moral order. The absence of control shaped humility. Medieval people did not expect mastery over environment or fate. They focused on readiness rather than dominance. This worldview reduced shock when harm occurred. Loss was tragic, but not incomprehensible. Resilience grew from expectation. Modern societies often equate safety with control. Medieval societies equated safety with adaptation. This difference shaped emotional response to danger. Understanding medieval risk challenges modern assumptions. Control is not the only way to live with uncertainty. Acceptance and preparation can sustain life under constant threat. In the next part, we will explore how medieval people coped psychologically with this uncertainty through habit, belief, and shared meaning, and how endurance became a cultural skill. Endurance in the medieval world was not simply a physical capacity. It was a way of thinking, a cultural skill developed through repetition, belief, and shared expectation. People did not endure because they believed suffering would end soon. They endured because endurance itself was necessary for life to continue. Psychological resilience was cultivated indirectly. There were no formal methods for managing stress or trauma. Instead, endurance was embedded in routine. Daily repetition stabilized emotion. Familiar tasks provided structure when circumstances were uncertain. Habit reduced decision fatigue. When much of life followed established patterns, individuals were spared constant choice. This did not eliminate difficulty, but it reduced cognitive strain. One did not ask whether to continue, one simply did. Belief systems reinforced endurance by framing hardship as meaningful rather than arbitrary. Suffering was interpreted within narratives that provided explanation and purpose. This did not remove pain, but it gave it context. Language itself supported endurance. Proverbs, sayings, and prayers condensed experience into repeatable forms. These phrases offered reassurance without requiring analysis. They reminded people that hardship was shared and expected. Community played a crucial role. Endurance was collective. People drew strength from witnessing others persist. Shared hardship reduced isolation. Survival was understood as a group achievement. Ritual provided emotional containment. Repeated actions during crisis, prayer, fasting, procession, imposed order on chaos. These acts did not change events, but they changed experience. Silence was also a tool. Not every hardship was spoken of. Restraint prevented despair from spreading. This was not denial, but containment. Humor existed even in hardship. Jokes, irony, and shared laughter relieved tension. Humor did not trivialize suffering. It softened it. Children learned endurance by observation. They watched adults persist. Emotional responses were modeled rather than explained. Strength was learned through participation. Endurance shaped morality. Virtues such as patience, humility, and steadfastness were praised because they sustained life. Impulsiveness and excess threatened balance. This endurance did not make medieval people passive. They acted when action was possible, but they accepted limits without collapse. Modern observers often misinterpret endurance as resignation. In the medieval context, it was adaptive intelligence. Knowing when to endure and when to act preserved resources. Endurance also preserved identity. Continuing familiar practices affirmed belonging even when conditions worsened. Ritual and routine anchored selfhood. As conditions changed slowly over time, endurance allowed adaptation without rupture. People adjusted without losing coherence. Understanding endurance as cultural practice reveals why medieval societies survived repeated crises. They were built not for comfort, but for persistence. In the next part, we will examine how medieval daily life appears when viewed not through modern judgment, but through its own internal logic, and what this perspective reveals about humanity across time. To understand medieval daily life clearly, one must suspend the instinct to measure it against modern standards. Judgment based on comfort, speed, or choice obscures the internal logic that made medieval societies functional. When examined on their own terms, these lives reveal coherence rather than deficiency. Medieval people did not lack intelligence or creativity. They applied both within the boundaries imposed by environment, technology, and belief. What appears restrictive from a modern perspective often functioned as stabilization within a fragile world. Choice was limited, but expectation was aligned with possibility. This alignment reduced disappointment. Life was not evaluated by what could have been, but by what was sustained. The absence of constant novelty preserved attention. People noticed small changes in weather, land, and behavior because these details mattered. Awareness was practical rather than abstract. Meaning was external rather than internalized. Identity formed through role and relationship, not self-exploration. This did not diminish individuality. It situated it within community. The medieval worldview integrated contradiction. Faith coexisted with doubt. Custom adapted slowly. Stability absorbed tension rather than denying it. Modern narratives often portray the medieval period as a waiting room for progress. This interpretation misunderstands endurance as stagnation. Medieval life was not incomplete. It was complete within its context. Hardship was not romanticized, but it was expected. This expectation reduced shock. Emotional energy was directed toward response rather than outrage. People measured success by continuity. A family that endured, a field that produced, a community that held together. These were achievements. Violence, disease, and loss were real, but they did not define existence entirely. Life contained texture, variation, and moments of genuine satisfaction. Time moved slowly enough for memory to matter. Stories connected generations. The past informed the present without overwhelming it. Authority functioned because it was visible. Power was experienced through people rather than systems. This proximity constrained abuse and enabled negotiation. The medieval world valued sufficiency over accumulation. Excess threatened balance. Moderation preserved survival. From within this framework, medieval life was not a struggle against inadequacy, but an exercise in alignment. Values matched conditions. Expectations matched reality. When conditions changed, alignment strained. New possibilities disrupted coherence. Medieval systems adapted until they transformed into something new. Seeing the medieval world clearly requires humility. It reminds us that modern assumptions are not universal truths. Human flourishing takes many forms. This perspective does not excuse injustice or suffering. It contextualizes them. It explains how people lived meaningful lives under constraints that would feel intolerable today. As this documentary continues, we will reflect on how studying ordinary medieval life reshapes our understanding of history itself. Shifting focus from events to experience, from progress to persistence. When history is told through dates, rulers, and conflicts, it can appear as a sequence of disruptions. Yet the medieval world reminds us that continuity, not disruption, forms the true foundation of human history. Ordinary lives, lived repeatedly and quietly, sustain societies far more reliably than extraordinary moments ever could. Most medieval people never shaped events beyond their immediate surroundings. They did not write laws, command armies, or influence distant decisions. Yet without their labor, compliance, and cooperation, none of the visible structures of medieval power could have functioned. Fields were planted year after year. Houses were repaired. Children were raised. These acts did not alter the course of history in dramatic ways, but they preserved it. Stability emerged from repetition. This repetition did not imply sameness. Each year differed slightly. Weather varied. Families grew or shrank. Circumstances changed. Yet the framework remained intact because ordinary people adapted without demanding transformation. Historical change occurred when these frameworks could no longer absorb pressure. But even then, transition was shaped by habits formed over centuries of ordinary life. The future grew out of the past not through rupture, but through accumulation. The medieval emphasis on duty over aspiration ensured continuity. People did not expect fulfillment through novelty. They found meaning in maintenance. This mindset reduced volatility. Modern historical narratives often privilege moments of rupture because they are visible and dramatic. Continuity leaves fewer records. It appears unremarkable. Yet continuity is what allows societies to exist long enough for change to matter. Understanding medieval life through ordinary experience shifts the scale of history. It centers attention on what most people actually lived rather than what a few people did. This perspective also reveals the limits of individual agency. Medieval people acted within constraints they did not choose. Their success lay not in overcoming these limits, but in navigating them skillfully. Ordinary lives shaped norms. Through daily behavior, people reinforced expectations about work, family, belief, and authority. These norms constrained power as much as they supported it. When power ignored ordinary experience, it destabilized itself. Governance endured only when it aligned with daily realities. This alignment depended on ordinary people's participation. The medieval world endured because it was built from the bottom up. Systems rested on habits rather than ideology. Compliance was practical, not enthusiastic. This does not mean medieval people lacked imagination. They imagined within bounds. They dreamed cautiously. Hope was directed toward survival rather than reinvention. Ordinary life also preserved humanity through hardship. When institutions failed, relationships remained. Kinship and community absorbed shock when structures weakened. The resilience of medieval society cannot be understood without acknowledging the competence of ordinary people. They were not passive recipients of tradition. They were its carriers. By studying their lives, we see history not as a march of ideas, but as a series of adjustments made by people who wanted stability more than change. This reframing alters how we understand progress. Progress appears not as inevitable advancement, but as a rare byproduct of sustained continuity. The medieval world demonstrates that societies can persist for centuries without constant transformation. Survival itself is an achievement. As this documentary continues, we will consider how this understanding reshapes the purpose of historical study, not to judge the past, but to understand how humans endure under constraint.